New York. Morning of June 3, 2025. In front of the Federal Courthouse, for the Southern District of Manhattan, the sky was blue but the air was thick with rumors. A group of reporters had gathered before 6 a.m. Cameras were rolling microphones aimed at every doorway. But they weren't waiting for Diddy, who had already made numerous appearances before. They were waiting for two other faces, Jessie James and Delilah Starr Combs, his 18-year-old twin daughters. Over the past week, several media outlets had reported that the girls might take the stand not as victims, but as character witnesses. A source from the defense attorney's office revealed that Diddy's team was considering emotionally impactful options to sway the jury. And few things evoke sympathy like daughters publicly defending their father in the eye of a media storm. But at 9:16 a.m. that day, something unexpected happened. A court assistant walked to the prosecution's table and handed over a sealed envelope. Judge Harrison Trent took it quietly, read its contents. He showed no expression. Then he said, "The court acknowledges that the two witnesses, Jessie and Delilah Combs, have declined to appear. They do not wish to testify." Not a whisper stirred in the courtroom. Both the prosecution and the defense remained silent for several seconds, long enough for a heavy, invisible pressure to spread across the gallery. On the back bench, Sean Diddy Combs leaned into his chair, arms folded across his chest, eyes fixed on the ceiling. He said nothing, but according to journalists present, his lips were tightly pressed, and a subtle twitch in his brow betrayed a reflex he could not suppress. Diddy, the man who once called his daughters the last light after Kim's death, had just been publicly declined by those very lights in front of dozens of reporters and the full jury panel. Later that evening, a leaked copy of the letter sent by Jessie and Delilah to the court surfaced reportedly from someone inside the prosecution team. The letter was brief, but the impact was seismic due to its restrained yet unequivocal tone. "We, Jessie James and Delilah Starr Combs, have received subpoenas from the legal team representing Mr. Sean Combs. We confirm that we are of legal age 18, and by law we reserve the right to decline to testify if we feel psychologically uncomfortable doing so. We love our father, but we do not wish to be forced to speak in court to defend things we know are not true. We have witnessed many things, and we cannot and should not lie under oath." The words were calm, but it was that very calmness that shook the public. There was no need to describe abuse, no need to recount a traumatic past. Just one firm assertion, "we have witnessed many things," was enough to shake the moral defense wall Diddy had long built around himself. For years, he had crafted the image of the reluctant but responsible father following the 2018 death of Kim Porter. He regularly posted photos with his children on social media. In an Essence magazine interview, he said, "Every day I wake up with one goal: to be a better father than I was yesterday." And yet, his eldest daughters, the ones long referred to as Kim's living legacy, refused to validate that narrative in the eyes of the law. Their refusal to appear in court was not necessarily a rejection of their father. On the contrary, one could argue it was the hardest decision they had ever made, choosing silence over speaking falsehoods to protect a loved one. Media psychologist Amelia Carr, who has studied child behavior in abusive households, commented, "The silence of minors when a parent is accused usually stems from two extremes, either deep fear or avoidance of truth. But when someone who is 18 can refuse to cooperate with their own father's legal team, it's not fear, it's a moral conscience." On CBS News, journalist Dan Abrams stated bluntly, "They didn't need to testify. They just needed to sit there and smile at their dad, and that alone could have influenced the jury. But they didn't, and that speaks louder than any accusation." Immediately after the hearing, attorney Brian Steele addressed the press in a short briefing. With his trademark cold demeanor, he said, "We respect the individual decisions of all citizens, including family members of the defendant. But we also question whether the public has been overly influenced by media and social platforms. Steele suggested that Jessie and Delilah may have been affected by a targeted public smear campaign led by parties with their own agendas. He emphasized, "We are not asking them to lie, but we believe that if they were to appear, the truth would be clearer." When asked if they would continue efforts to subpoena the twins, he replied simply, "They are my client's children. Family is sacred. We will not force them." On platforms like Reddit, Twitter X, and TikTok, the phrase "Diddy twins refuse" quickly went viral. But instead of criticism, the majority of comments expressed support and admiration for the girls. A Twitter account with over 100,000 followers wrote, "Imagine being 18. Your father is a millionaire. The pressure is on to stay quiet for the family. But you still choose not to lie." Jessie and Delilah are a living example to Gen Z that honesty isn't always loud. A 2022 video resurfaced, suddenly featuring Diddy on a talk show being asked, "Do your daughters ever disagree with you?" He answered, "They love me. No matter what I do, I'm their father." Now the clip was re-edited with a new caption. "They love him, but they didn't protect him." A source within the prosecution revealed that during a closed-door session a few days earlier, Diddy's legal team had floated the idea of presenting moral support witnesses, including his children, to craft a more favorable image of the defendant. Jessie and Delilah's refusal effectively dismantled that strategy. Worse, it backfired, becoming what one prosecutor described as psychological evidence for the claim that even those closest to him couldn't vouch for his nonviolent character. In a leaked conversation between two attorneys during a recess, one was overheard saying, "I've never seen a counterpunch hit this hard. Sometimes you don't need a witness to accuse you, just need someone to refuse to defend." In 2011, during an interview with Vanity Fair, Kim Porter, Diddy's longtime partner and mother of the twins, said something that now echoes with chilling clarity. "I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about my daughters, because they're growing up in two worlds, one full of light and one no one dares to name." At the time, many assumed she was referring to the pressures of fame, media scrutiny, or the challenges of raising children in the world of the rich. But in light of the emerging allegations, violence, coercion, manipulation, and cover-ups, people began to understand what Kim truly meant by the world no one dares to name. It was the darkness her daughters had grown up in. A former nanny for the Combs household, identified in court as LT, worked at the Holmby Hills estate from 2014 to 2018. In closed testimony on June 2nd, she recounted an incident from early 2016 when Jessie was just 9 years old. "I was cleaning the upstairs hallway when I heard something heavy crash to the floor, then yelling. Jessie ran out of the room pale as a sheet and said, 'Dad was throwing things and crying. I don't know what's going on.'" According to LT, Diddy had been drinking. A personal assistant had just quit and a business partner had backed out of a deal. In a fit of rage, he smashed a valuable antique vase and shouted at the remaining staff, "I made you. I can erase you too." LT said Jessie just stood there. She didn't cry. She asked me, "Is he a bad person?" And that was the first time I didn't know how to answer. Another housekeeper, Maria, verified through records from a contracted cleaning service, described Diddy's habit of holding team meetings in the middle of the night, not for work, but to vent his frustrations. He'd summon everyone into the living room, nannies, drivers, chefs. If even one person was missing, he'd scream, "You're embarrassing me in front of my guests." The girls, Jessie and Delilah, were sometimes woken up at 1 or 2 a.m. just to greet guests or sing a few lines. One particular incident was recounted by Capricorn Clark, the 12th prosecution witness and a former assistant. She described Diddy forcing Jessie to perform a K-pop dance routine in front of an all-male group of guests. Jessie was 12 at the time. Capricorn recalled, "I was standing right there. Jessie looked at me pleading with her eyes, but I couldn't do anything. I just remember her whispering, 'Miss Cap, I'm embarrassed.' I've never forgiven myself for staying silent." In November 2018, Kim Porter died of pneumonia at age 47. Diddy called her his one true love and posted tearful tributes on Instagram. But during a closed session with witness TF, a former family therapist for the Combs household, a different truth emerged. Jessie and Delilah found their mother unresponsive in bed and waited nearly 20 minutes before the assistant discovered her. Jessie was the one who called 911. She screamed, "My mom's not breathing." After Kim's death, Diddy brought the twins to live with him at the main estate, but according to TF, the emotional toll of losing their mother combined with the pressure of living with a volatile father took a heavy psychological toll. I recommended they be given private space to grieve. Mr. Combs refused. He said, "They need to learn to be strong. I lost my mom young, too." A 2021 therapy note allowed in court showed Jessie once told her therapist she hated the black room. When asked which room, she replied, "The basement room. No one is allowed in there except special guests." That room, according to an FBI warrant executed in March 2024, was soundproofed, contained black leather chairs, internal surveillance cameras, and a magnetic lock only operable from the outside. On a laptop belonging to Diddy's tech assistant agents discovered an email dated October 7, 2019, sent to the home's technical crew. "Make sure room 3 is completely soundproof when shut." Jessie nearly heard it last time. The email was submitted as evidence, though it remains unclear whether it will be presented to the jury. In a confidential interrogation with former housekeeper Gladys Monroe, a striking detail emerged. "I once found a small notebook in Jessie's drawer. The first page had a weird code, yabba dad angry v dad happy grandi dab of someone crying. I asked her, 'What is this?' She said, 'I don't want anyone to know what happens in our house.' Prosecutors suggested this was Jessie's way of recording family incidents without drawing attention. When asked why she wrote it down, Monroe said, 'She told me, so I won't forget who did what to my mom.'" During the May 3rd accession, the prosecution introduced a recording captured by a kitchen surveillance camera at the Holmby Hills estate on March 17, 2020. Jessie's voice, "I don't want to eat tonight. I'm tired." Male voice confirmed as Diddy, "I said, eat. Your mom's gone, so don't make me snap. Sound of breaking dishes." A gasp. Jessie yells, "Don't be like when you hit Miss Kayla, according to records." Miss Kayla was a former personal assistant who left the estate in 2019 and declined to cooperate with either legal side. But the fact that Jessie recalled an act of violence was enough to silence the jury for nearly 2 minutes. In April 2025, Diddy's legal team began working with a family law attorney to persuade Jessie and Delilah to testify. But according to a source within the legal circle speaking anonymously, both girls refused from the start. Jessie was very clear, "I don't want to take the stand and say things I don't believe." Delilah cried and said, "I saw Mom in a dream. She told me not to lie." Instead of appearing in court, the girls completely withdrew from public view. They deactivated their social media, left Los Angeles, and are now reportedly living with their maternal aunt in a small town in Oregon. Their school, Sierra Canyon, confirmed that both had temporarily withdrawn from final term graduation activities. Jessie and Delilah's refusal was not merely a personal choice. It was the result of years growing up in a silent space distorted by power fear and memories they could not and did not want to erase. They didn't file a lawsuit. They didn't testify. They didn't speak to the press. But through deliberate silence, they made the system listen loudly. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs had been in control of performance stages, recording contracts, public narratives. He curated publicity campaigns with surgical precision, especially for black audiences. He built the image of the devoted single dad to counter scandals. And above all, he believed with money, influence, and charisma, everything could be managed. But on the morning of June 3, 2025, in a federal courtroom in Manhattan, that image collapsed not from an indictment, but from 2 empty chairs that never got filled. When Diddy heard the news about their refusal, a journalist from The Hollywood Reporter who was present described, when the judge announced Jessie and Delilah would not testify, Diddy didn't look up right away. It took him a few seconds. Then he leaned forward, clasped his hands. But instead of reacting or objecting, he just stayed silent. That was the moment I realized he was no longer the man the press once called the mogul. Attorney Brian Steele, seated beside him, tried to mask his reaction. He bowed his head and scribbled in his notebook. But according to multiple veteran legal reporters, this was a clear sign they had not prepared for this outcome. A legal aide, part of Diddy's team, was spotted exiting the courtroom earlier than usual. The press quickly speculated about an internal crisis among Diddy's legal ranks. However, no public statement was made. Puff Daddy is panicking. That afternoon, TMZ Live opened their podcast with the line, "Puff Daddy is panicking." He just realized this time he's alone. The phrase instantly became the title of countless viral clips across social media. Psychological analyses, reaction videos, and memes spread like wildfire. One TikTok video showing Diddy slouched in court with Simon and Garfunkel's Sound of Silence playing in the background garnered over 4 million views in just 24 hours. But beneath the spectacle was a cold reality. Diddy had not only lost his strategic edge in court, he had also lost his final weapon, his fatherly image. Behavioral shift, signs of losing control. Within 72 hours of the shock, court observers began noticing visible changes in Diddy's behavior, no longer engaging with the press. Once known for his subtle nods or smirks at cameras, he now walked past reporters without making eye contact. Fidgeting in court, constantly shifting in his seat, tapping fingers, shaking his leg. On June 5th, the judge had to caution him to remain still after observing him shaking his head repeatedly during testimony about Kim Porter. Darting eyes. A journalist described, he scanned the room from prosecutors to jurors to spectators as if searching for someone to hold on to. According to forensic psychologist Dr. Judith Romero, NYU, these were classic signs of psychological control. Breakdown often seen in individuals with a long history of manipulative behavior. They are not accustomed to being challenged by loved ones. When that happens, the collapse isn't legal, it's internal. They are forced to face themselves. Just 2 days later, a female witness referred to as Mia took the stand. Mia had worked as Diddy's personal assistant from 2006 to 2014. She accused him of rape abuse and forced confinement across multiple countries during business trips. During cross-examination, prosecutor Madison Smizer asked, "Why did you agree to testify today?" Mia looked down, silent for a few seconds, then said, "Because I can't look my niece in the eye and say, 'Auntie stayed quiet for money.'" Many in the courtroom reportedly teared up, but what shattered Diddy even more was what came next. Mia brought up his daughters. "I used to see Jessie and Delilah cleaning up after all-night parties. They once asked me, 'Miss Mia, why are people crying in the music room?' I didn't know what to say." According to a journalist in the room, Diddy slapped his forehead, exhaled deeply, eyes red. According to a source close to the family later confirmed by U.S. media, Diddy requested a call with his daughters on the evening of June 3rd through his family lawyer. The call was not accepted. 2 days later, Jessie and Delilah's attorneys sent a formal email declining any form of contact, direct phone or legal, with Sean Combs until the conclusion of the trial. "Our clients require personal space. Any pressure from the defendant may be considered psychological interference and could constitute unlawful influence." This was a direct blow to what Diddy's team had hoped would be their emotional reconciliation strategy. If they once thought the girls might show up at the last minute, that door was now firmly shut. He hasn't just lost his daughters, he's lost himself. On MSNBC, legal analyst Jonathan Moore stated Diddy didn't just lose in court. He lost in the place that matters most, his own family. And that's something no jury can ignore. A former producer who worked with Diddy from 2004 to 2009, speaking anonymously, told The Cut, "He always thought he was invincible. But now he's not just lost his daughters, he's lost the one thing that made him human, the belief that he was loved. In court, He still wore suits, arrived on time, and sat upright. But behind eyes that once brimmed with swagger was now unmistakable panic. No assistant looked at him with reverence. No lawyer advised him to stand tall. No daughter stood by his side. There was only Sean Combs, the man who once ruled every stage, now sitting silently at the defendant's table, face to face with the one thing he could never control, the truth. When absence becomes a witness. In high-profile criminal cases, not every witness has to speak. Not every truth has to be said aloud. In the case of Jessie and Delilah Combs, their decision to stay silent, vanishing from public view, refusing to testify, locking down their online presence, became a symbolic act of immense weight. They didn't cry on television. They didn't write accusatory letters. They didn't give interviews. And yet, in the context of dozens of women coming forward with allegations, their silence hit harder than any sworn testimony. His children don't believe in him anymore. Professor Naomi Fields, a sociologist at UCLA, called Jessie and Delilah's decision a quintessential Gen Z response to toxic control. They didn't bang tables, they didn't condemn, but they didn't defend either. They simply walked away from a man who once represented power, wealth, and deep emotional harm. This is modern resistance. No slogans, no protests. Family psychology experts agree in homes with psychological abuse, silence can become a survival tactic, both for self-protection and as a quiet reclaiming of personal agency. A former family therapist who once worked with the Combs household shared, "I once asked Jessie, 'What would you do if your father did something wrong?' She answered, 'I won't scream. I'll just disappear, like Mom used to when he hurt her.'" A carefully calculated retreat from the spotlight. In the 10 days following their court refusal, both twins deactivated their Instagram accounts. Sierra Canyon confirmed their withdrawal from final exams to prioritize mental health. Their lawyers refused all press inquiries from NBC and CNN to the Shade Room. A relative from the Porter side of the family stated they don't want to be pawns in the battle between Diddy and the prosecution. More importantly, they don't want to be used to rebuild his image. To outsiders, this looked like maturity. But to those familiar with the household, it was the result of years learning how to stay quiet in a home where female voices were often shut down. Their absence spoke louder than any word. During the June 6th arguments, prosecutor Maureen Comey addressed the jury with a sharp observation. "We are not charging Mr. Combs based on his daughter's testimony, but their absence after years of living under his roof, after being proclaimed the loves of his life, is telling. They didn't stand by him. They didn't deny the accusations brought by other women. So I ask you, who are they protecting?" The defense objected swiftly. Brian Steele declared, "Family members have no legal obligation to testify." They declined because they didn't want to add more pain. But the jury wasn't looking away. Several were seen scribbling notes as Comey added they didn't testify against him. But they also didn't defend him. And that says the most. If even his daughters don't believe him, why should we? CBS legal analyst Chanel Griffin offered this insight. Juries are more influenced by emotion than they realize. When the people closest to the accused won't speak for him, that's a powerful psychological signal. On Reddit, a thread titled "Even His Daughters Walked Away" drew over 20,000 comments. One user wrote, "I don't care how famous he is. If your daughters don't show up, don't call you innocent even once something happened." A photo, a hug, a broken promise. A photo from 2018 taken right after Kim Porter's funeral resurfaced. In it, Diddy holds his twin daughters tightly. In a clip he says, "I promise to always protect you. No one will ever hurt you, not even me." That image now circulates alongside testimonies of abuse, coercion, and manipulation. A TikTok clip overlays Diddy's 2020 interview, quote, "Family is everything to me," with the caption, "Then why aren't they with you anymore?" Jessie, the girl who once apologized to her mother on her father's behalf. In a closed session, prosecutors introduced a handwritten note from Jessie in 2019 addressed to her mother, even though Kim Porter had already passed. It was found in a memory journal. "Mom today," Dad yelled again. "I tried to protect Delilah. I miss you. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. If I were older, stronger, I wouldn't let Dad make you sad. I promise I'll be different someday." No one on the jury said a word when the note was read aloud, but according to courtroom reporters, one juror, a woman in her 50s, wiped away tears. Delilah, the girl who once asked, "Will Dad be mad if I tell the truth?" Delilah's private therapist name, withheld for privacy, recorded a session in 2021, later included in court filings. Delilah asked, "If I say what I saw, will Dad be mad at me? If I don't say it, I'll feel guilty. But if I do, I might lose him." This emotional bind is common in families plagued by power abuse. But what made Delilah's choice profound was that she decided not to speak, not complicit, but not accusatory. And that, many argue, is the hardest choice of all, to stand between love and truth. Silence. Not weakness. During the June 7th hearing, a quote was projected on the courtroom screen, a line from Kim Porter's 2009 speech at an Essence event. "A mother isn't the loudest voice in the house. She's the one watching silently, teaching her children when to speak and when to stay silent." In choosing silence, Jessie and Delilah didn't betray their father. They simply refused to become instruments to defend someone who had caused them harm, even if that person was family. And perhaps their silence wasn't just a refusal. It was their way of saying to the world, "We cannot and will not lie." Sean Diddy Combs once said, "I can do anything. Turn a nobody into a superstar. Turn a small business into an empire. Shut down any scandal before it catches fire." For over 30 years in the entertainment industry, Diddy wasn't just a musical icon, he was a master of narrative control. Allegations of violent sex drugs were buried, diluted, or overshadowed by chart-topping hits, charity events, or the image of a model single father. But by June 2025, for the first time, he faced an enemy he could not manipulate: the truth. And for the first time, he discovered truth is the only thing that can't be bought. Not with money, not with fame, not even with silence. A failed strategy rebuilding image through family. When the initial accusations surfaced from Cassie Hotel staff former assistants, Diddy's legal team mapped out a counteroffensive: avoid media confrontation, reinforce the loving father image, bring forward inner circle witnesses, including his daughters, to testify about his character. At first, this seemed like the last card Diddy could play, especially with public sentiment still torn between viewing him as a power mogul and a caring family man. But when Jessie and Delilah declined to testify without making a single public statement in support of their father, the entire strategy crumbled. Instead of a moving story about family unity, Diddy now stood as the image of a father abandoned at his most desperate hour. Silent, but not invisible. Why did Jessie and Delilah's absence carry so much weight? The answer isn't in what they said, but in who they were to him. These twins were Diddy's public anchors, especially after Kim Porter's death. They accompanied him to events, earned praise as the perfect daughters, and featured in countless stories with headlines like "The Rap Tycoon" and his most important role being dad. Now, the very daughters once used to prove Diddy's decency had refused to validate it, and they didn't need to accuse. They just needed to not confirm. That was enough. Journalist Shannon Banks, The Atlantic, summed it up. "Sometimes when no one stands behind you, it's not because you were abandoned, it's because you pushed everyone away." The courtroom, the final stage where nothing can be edited. Diddy used to control every stage, but a courtroom is not a stage. There's no director, no post-production, no lighting crew to soften your face, no mic to mute your accusers. Here, text messages, recordings, witness testimonies, and most notably the absence of loved ones, become legal facts. What Diddy once dismissed as private family matters now counted as evidence. When the prosecution played a video of Jessie hugging her mother at a funeral with Diddy standing behind them motionless without so much as a comforting gesture, the jury looked down. Not out of sadness, but recognition. Sometimes what we don't do is just as damning as what we do. No one calls him daddy anymore. When Diddy reached the peak of his fame in the 2000s, the name Puff Daddy symbolized more than music. It embodied black cultural influence, soft power, and swagger. Daddy wasn't just a stage name. It was a role, a protector, a builder, a leader. Now on forums he's called Defendant Combs, the disgraced mogul, the predator in velvet. But no one calls him Daddy, because that title, unofficial as it may be, has been publicly revoked by the only people who had the right to use it, his daughters. An empire, a family, and one final question. Diddy once had it all, a music empire, a 9-figure net worth, the admiration of media, the affection of fans, and a family or so it seemed. But after multiple lawsuits, dozens of witnesses, and the resolute silence of Jessie and Delilah, all of that now feels fractured. A journalist who once interviewed Diddy wrote in a blog post he once told me, "Even if I lose everything, I'll still have my kids beside me." Now I want to ask him, if you've lost everything, and even they're no longer there, what do you have left? Final words. No need for accusation, only reckoning. The biggest lesson from this trial won't be found in the hundreds of pages of indictments. It lies in a quiet image. 2 18-year-old girls walking away from the shadow of a famous father, not speaking out, not defending, not condemning, but simply refusing to lie. It's the story of thousands of children raised in the dark corners of powerful adults where honesty isn't encouraged and loyalty is defined by silence. But Jessie and Delilah chose a different path. And because of that, even without a final verdict, part of the truth has already surfaced, not through accusations, but through the simple refusal to stand in defense. Sometimes you don't need to accuse anyone. You just need to stop helping them hide.